Welcome back. So today we do have something special. Special is usually designated by the green cloth down there to prevent scratches and to take special care of a very special set loaned by a very special guy out in Ohio. So many thanks, John, for the loaner, for the opportunity to hear this guy. And this one is the Nightjar Acoustics Singularity. So, very special set, sort of handcrafted. I would call Nightjar Acoustics perhaps a boutique IEM maker. They used to make some fantastic cables, and now they kind of dabble in IEMs as well. So, I think they've collaborated on a couple, and I think this one is actually designated as Nightjar Acoustics Singularity. So, very special set. This is 24 karat gold plated accent piece, so very, very cool. I think what I noticed most about the shell is the short nozzle. It's actually quite short. The fit is a little bit wonky for me, and we'll kind of get into that in a minute. But yeah, kind of all blacked out, gold accent, very, very nice looking set. For those of you who aren't aware of where this one fits in the special $1,300 range, this one is a big bass. Doesn't look huge, but definitely I would call this one a handcrafted bass response, I think is how I called it. So very much, really into driver design and getting a bass response that they loved, and the rest of it has some fancier marketing terms which we will get into as well. But I would say this one is mostly for the fans of a big bass response that is also technical and detailed and very, very high quality bass response. That is what this one is pitched towards. So we might go back to the graph, maybe not. It doesn't really capture too much of what was really special about this set. So this one sort of falls in the category of, I kind of enjoyed it. I enjoyed it enough that I think other people will enjoy it more than I do, and I think I will send this one on its way. It kind of gets to a point where I'm not sure I am clicking with a set, and it almost feels like when I get done at night, I'm like, should I put this one in or should I put something else in? And the more that becomes a question, and the more I ponder it, the more I think it really becomes a time to move on. And very much with Singularity after a week, I'm kind of satisfied with it. I've heard it, enjoyed it. I think it's time to move on. So what was special about this one? Like I just said, handcrafted bass response and driver design. So all pretty much custom done by Nightjar Acoustics. Also the 24 karat gold plated faceplate accent piece. So how did it go? So I will say on the very first day, I wasn't so into it. I really couldn't get the fit right. And like I was talking about, I think this short nozzle, and I've done short nozzles before, I think oxygen is kind of fine for me. This one bothered me a lot, and I couldn't quite, maybe it's just a little bit more shallow. I don't know. I couldn't get the fit right with my normal tips. I ended up going with Comply foam tips because that was the only thing I could really get it deep enough in to fit in my ear where it sounded like I actually had a seal. So it didn't really start off all that good. And then when I sort of got it sitting in my ear right, it sounded broken. Like I couldn't figure out, why is it was so far from my expectations of a big bass set that I couldn't quite figure out what was going on. And I literally measured it because I thought it was broken, and it was not broken. But yeah, I just didn't click with the sound at all right up front. Yeah. So I would say to me, what it really sounded like, it just sounds like it was tuned by someone with a very different HRTF. The way the person who tuned this hears music or the world is sort of different than the way I do. And it just feels like it's like two gears kind of meshing, but not quite together. It sounds okay, but I don't think I ever got it to the point where I would say that I heard it the way it was tuned by the tuner. It always just felt like something was really off. And really after the first day, I was pretty much ready to move on. It just wasn't my thing. So on day 2, very, very smart guy on Discord named Vexter says it's probably an EDM specialist. And as soon as I hit EDM, the sky's clear, the angels started singing, and yes, it hits EDM very, very well. I can't say it hits all genres very well, but EDM is what it does very, very well, and I think he absolutely nailed it. So beyond day two, I pretty much focused only on EDM, and I would say yes, it is an EDM specialist, but if it wasn't tuned for Daft Punk's Random Access Memories, I'd be super shocked. It's the kind of end to end of that whole CD sounds almost flawless and perfect on this set. Just something about the range that they use, because it's lower in electronic dance music, but it's actually pitched lower. It doesn't really hit a whole lot of the upper range. This one is very much in the sweet spot with that whole CD. So yeah, I'd be absolutely shocked if they didn't listen to that over and over again on the set, because it sounds like it's perfectly tuned to that whole CD. So is it my thing? I'll still say mostly it really comes down to it is a handcrafted sound, and it's too picky with my typical music. I think electronic dance music, it hits perfectly. When it hits, but it's, for me, it's really just centered on EDM, and I like EDM, but it grows tiresome, and after a week, I'm kind of done with the EDM. So yeah, I kind of just got bored and tired of listening to EDM over and over again just to listen to the set, to get it to the point where I could write notes and talk about it. So here we are. So Timbre Plus is something that one of their marketing terms, and I agree. I think their driver and bass response has a really unique high level of technical presentation on bass. I think they absolutely kind of nailed that part. I think the whole set is essentially designed, and this frequency response is around this concept of a very technical, very detailed, very nice bass response at a high level of bass response as well. The rest of it, I'll say it always felt a little bit forced, more technical than natural. I just couldn't get into it. I think as long as you're on electronic music, I think it all hit pretty well. Beyond that, it just felt never quite comfortable for me. And it does have top of the line moments. Like there are times where you hear the bass and you can hear even some mids. You hear some absolutely top of the line moments, but again, they're just kind of fleeting moments. And at $1,300, I think it hits some really nice moments, but probably not enough that this would be one that I would consider purchasing. I think it has moments, but probably not enough for me to pay that much money. So low flex, I think they do have some pressure relief system to make sure it's not flexing too much. I didn't really have a problem. Again, it's kind of a shallow fit for me, so I don't think the seal was to the point where I had to worry about that point. Cathedral is more about their marketing around the large and vast soundscape, and I sort of half agree with this one. I think on EDM, on Daft Punk, on tracks with little to no vocals, I think it does work out pretty well. I wouldn't call it vast, but I would say it does have a very unique layering system, a presentation with really forward vocals. And again, I kind of go back to this handcrafted bit. I think they really, really handcrafted something that's very special to them, how they prefer it. It doesn't exactly sound natural to me, and I kind of go back to HRTF. That there's something that they prefer that doesn't really click with me, and a lot of it were the forward vocals. So a lot of bass with very forward vocals. The two don't really work for me at the same time. I think the pennant area tends to be a little too forward, and it just ruins the illusion of the vast soundscape for me. It really comes across as quite forward, and it kind of makes sense over a large bass response. You want very clean, clear, very detailed. It does some really great vocals at some point in time. Over the bass, again, the bass doesn't really interfere with any of the vocals because of the way they're layered together. They definitely did some really nice handcrafting bits on that part to make it very special. Didn't quite hit for me, but I can hear the thought and design that went into that little bit. So sound-wise, I think it is kind of a wicked VU shape. Sometimes it really does come across as a U shape because there's not a ton of bleed sometimes. The bass is very tight, very detailed, very high quality, so there's hardly any bloat to it at all. It's just a lean, mean bass response that's actually quite high, but you don't get, like a traditional V would have kind of a little bloat to it, a little boominess to it. This one doesn't really do that, and it doesn't cut so lean like where it would be a U shape. So it's somewhere in between the two, but obviously emphasizing a large technical bass response. So the bass, again, in isolation, this set is pretty much primarily centered around it. I get it. I think it is a unique dynamic driver with a very detailed, large response. And that doesn't really happen often. And again, I get the bit that they did, the handcrafted driver design, how they got the response as high as they did. But, beyond that, I think you need a little bit more at a price this set. I think I'm kind of a bass fan, but probably not enough that I was hearing everything that I wanted to hear at $1,300. And I think not as fun as it looks. And I think that is another bit that I'll say it sounds like a lean, mean bass. The response is high, but the fun is it's kind of okay. You're kind of expecting an ear-shaking experience, and it isn't really that. It's just a large response that actually maintained a high technical level, and that's not quite the same as a big, boomy, ear-shaking experience. So not quite as fun. I think they really chose their words carefully, and they call it a high level of technical capability, and I think that's exactly what they delivered. And I wouldn't call that super, super fun. I think it's a high level of technical capability for delivering very clean, high-quality bass, but sometimes I just want a set that has a lot less technical and a huge boom to it, and that's not this one. But if you play fun songs like Daft Punk, I think it does shine, and it actually does kind of hit that fun factor pretty well. And the mids, I think this is where volume gets in the way for me, and this is sort of where it kind of goes off the rails for me too. I think you pay $1,300 for the boom, and the boom includes some really forward upper mids also. And I remember talking to Michael Bruce the first night I was listening to it, and I put a big arrow here, and I said, it's really hard to hear this over this. This sort of grabbed my focus and attention, and I didn't like how forward it was. I didn't like the level that it was. I kept on waiting to hear the boom and the high level of bass, and all I kept on hearing were vocals that didn't sound natural or back far enough to feel comfortable. I never felt relaxed with this. It feels really intense, and as you turn up the volume, it just increases the intensity, and it never really feels relaxing. So yeah, I think part of it is the volume. I think part of it is the upper mids limiting volume. I didn't really like that too much about the set, but there are some moments, like everything else, where it's really, really nice vocals, but it's just never relaxing. Why it works in EDM for me, I think you get the bass response, which is where it's really centered, and then a higher treble level. So having electronic instruments and sounds kind of up here outside of this forwardness, I think that's what technically really worked better for me with EDM music as opposed to traditional pop music or even rock music, where this really grabbed my attention more than this. So I think that's why EDM worked for me. I do think Daft Punk's Random Access Memories. So again, Daft Punk's Random Access Memories a bit lower into lower mids, and I do think the lower mids are very, very well done. I think all that sounds kind of top of the line, but the upper on random pop tracks, I think it always felt awkward. It never felt comfortable. Didn't quite feel natural to me. So yeah, a lot of it is like this vibe I got from the set. Not so much the frequency response or the levels and tuning, but it never really made me feel like I wanted to keep listening to the set or pick it up the next day. It just felt sort of unnatural and awkward and just not a very relaxing, enjoyable experience. So I understand why people like it and what it can bring out, I think, on some tracks, but as far as an everyday carry set, it just doesn't really hit for me. Treble, again, this is where the HRTF really felt off. I think the emphasis on lower treble, really, really harder for me to hear the upper treble and to hear the soundstage expand. The vocals are forward and layered, but they're still really hard to hear around them. And again, I kind of got so fixated on this, it was very hard to hear the upper treble. There was so much going on here. you're trying to listen to this, there's a lot of this in your face, and to hear, what was happening out here, to hear that cathedral bit of it didn't really work for me. Just, the way this is all oriented and layered together, and how they brought the vocals forward. Again, it did actually work better on EDM, but tracks with less treble anyway. So stage, again, starts hard to find tracks where it sounded big, but the layering always worked. And I think the part that they didn't maybe have a marketing term for is where the vocals are and where the instruments are and how all that is presented in a very separated and layered fashion. I think they did nail that. How it works with everything else, I think, didn't quite land for me. But yeah, I think there is a lot of handcrafting, a lot of specialness here, and it's going to hit someone else probably better than it hit me. So that's what I got on the Singularity. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.